Okay, so in our last video we looked at overloading methods, and we saw that there were different tricks that you could do to use the same method name but different parameters within the same class, and have it do different things. So we can also do that trick with a constructor. So let's say we wanted to make a different triangles constructor, one that accepts a width and a height, so we can set the size to whatever width and height we want. Well, one thing you could do is just copy the entire constructor like that, and add two integers, int width, int height, and down here we could say set size to width and height. Okay, so now if we choose, instead of just saying new triangles with no parameters, we could say new triangles with, let's say, 800 by 600. Okay, so that's going to change the size of our frame, because now we're not going to be calling this constructor that has no parameters. We're going to be calling this constructor that has two integers as parameters. Okay, and what's going to happen is we're going to set the size of the frame according to those two parameters. So let's do that. And we have a bigger window. Okay. Now that's one way to do it. All right. But there's another way, and it's a preferred way because it avoids error. Okay. So anything you can do basically to avoid human error, either on your part or on the part of the next person who has to work with your code. Okay, you want to do that, and one way you reduce the risk of error is by reducing the number of lines of code and reducing any redundancy. Okay, so we can use this trick. See how we had a call to the say method from inside a different say method, right? We can do a similar thing with constructors. The thing that's tricky though about doing that with constructors is there's no such thing as just a straight call to a constructor, right? You have to have this new keyword and then the constructor. Okay, so what we do so you can't directly say, for example, you can't directly here, I'm going to get rid of all this redundancy. And I know, because I know I'm setting the default version, the version with no parameters, sets the size to 600, 400. So what I'd like to do is something like this. I'd like to do something like call the triangles constructor with 600 and 400. Right? The problem is that this is not a method call. Okay? There's not you can't have the constructor itself without this new thing in here. So there's an allowance for that in the language. What they do is, what the designers of the language decided was, they said, well, instead of, since you can't call the constructor directly, we're going to use the keyword this. All right? And so what this means is that when this keyword is encountered with parentheses and parameters, you go this way inside a constructor. Okay, when you're in a constructor, you come across this and parentheses and some inputs that says go looking for another constructor that has those inputs. So that's what we do here. So we will automatically go and call the constructor that has these inputs. All right. So now to use my constructor with the parameters directly, I do this, yeah, and to use it with the default values of 600 and 400, I just do this. So this will call this constructor, and that, and using the this keyword, we call the next constructor. All right, so let's see. So this should be our 600 by 400 again. Okay, so yeah, so we got our 600 and 400 frame again. And it's doing all the says and all that stuff because it's calling this guy. Is there any other issues? You'll notice here we're getting a error, and it says here, yeah, this is something to remember. It says call to this must be first statement in constructor. So if you are going to use the this statement in a constructor, it has to be the first thing there. So you could say called next constructor with arms 600, 400, right? So that way you can know for sure that we're calling this guy. Okay, so, and notice it went through and did all the stuff in the constructor that has the parameters. It says you said hello, calling on, you know, all the say stuff, and then it says called next constructor with parm 600, 400, because what happened? It called to this. It did everything in the new constructor, in the second constructor that was called. So it did everything in the constructor that takes 2 ints as input, right? And then it printed out called next constructor with parm 600, 400. All right. So so that's how you know, when you're doing multiple constructors, that's what's going on with those. So hopefully, when you take a look at other constructors, like here's an example right here. See, that's what's going on here. We said CV triangles. We have the version with no parameters. It calls CV triangles with a float. Okay, so that's overloading constructors.